message.
And then on the right side of me is a pastor and his wife who have serious marital problems. I can tell that right away. I sat down, and she had her books evidently from an earlier meeting, either near my seat or at my seat. And so I asked her, did I take your seat? I'll gladly move down or move back, if this is your seat. And she said, oh no, and her husband just said, she's a dimwit. Now he's a pastor, just right. She's a dimwit. She can't remember anything she does. She doesn't remember where she put her books. You just sit there, the idiot, calling his wife that right in front of me. Well, I'll tell you something about this little pastor himself. He was about 45. He had on a 100% green polyester suit with bright blue socks. I mean, he doesn't know anything, nothing about fashion, nothing about the Bible. Not that he should know about fashion, but I'm just saying that he's so ignorant, he doesn't know anything. Bright green, 100%, it's probably 110%. I mean, it was polyester. Now, see, I don't have any problem if someone wants to wear a polyester suit. I'm just showing you that's his mentality about everything. It's cheap, it's make-believe, nothing is real. Bright blue socks. And she was sitting beside me with a Ryrie study Bible, reading right along with all the notes at the bottom of Ryrie. And the pastor in front of me had his wife. She was so large, she took up 2 seats. Now that's terrible for a pastor's wife. What a blemish on the congregation whenever you look and see that's what your pastor's wife looks like. Well, he wasn't too much better himself. He only took up 1 seat. He was hanging over, though. But he took up 1 seat, and his hair was as greasy as a fish's back. It was just... it was slicked down to his head like you wouldn't believe. I mean, just stuck, glued there. And here are the 3 pastors. See, I don't wonder why they only ranked him 49. Well, only 49% of the time they trust him on serious matters. Of course, if it's not serious, you never trust him because they don't know anything about culture or American history or anything. Well, that's typical country pastors there for you. 100% polyester suits and greased back hair and just ucky. Well, now that I've composed myself. Second behind the clergy are physicians. They rank 1 percentage point behind. On important matters such as your life, they tell you the truth only 48% of the time. Your wife or your husband ranks 3rd. On important subjects, how often do they always tell the truth? 40% of the time. On important matters, 40% of the time. 4th is your best friend. 26% of the time. That means 3 out of 4 times he lies to you on important matters. You can't have a friendship where you're lying 75% of the time. Behind your best friend is an auto repair worker. Now, I would rank them last if you ask me. I heard of a story a fellow told one time he just took his car in. He was busy just to get the oil changed. All he wanted was his oil changed. And so came back in and picked his car up later, and he got home and just curious, and pulled the dipstick out. It was just as black as mud. They had charged him for it, but they didn't put any new oil in there. They didn't take his old oil out. That happens all the time. So we're thankful we have some people around here who repair our cars for us. You can't trust a repair shop. Take your car in there and they're going to do something. I mean, that's just kind of like a stereotype in America today, is you cannot trust auto repair mechanics. So how often? 17% of the time. 8 times out of 10 about your car, they're going to lie to you. Oh, I believe it. Behind them, number 6, 5 o'clock news broadcaster. And he's saying it's auto repair 17% of the time. Network anchor. And then number 7, your local newspaper, 8% of the time. Now, they even tell us why do we rank local newspapers so far behind network anchor. In other words, now this isn't true necessarily, that they actually do lie this often. This is people's opinion of them. What do you think of these professions or these people? And they say it's because people just can hardly stand the thought that someone is going to sit and look them in the eye on television and tell them a lie. Therefore, they give more credibility to people who look them in the eye, a network anchor, than they do the newspaper. Because it's easy to lie in print, but they just hate to think someone's going to stare them right in the face and tell them a bold-faced lie. So they rank network anchors higher than the newspaper. All right, then what are we on, 8? The President of the United States. He's same as the local newspaper, 8%. That is, 8% of the time on important matters, he will tell the truth. And then who ranks last in this survey? With a 3% ranking, leaders of Congress. Leaders of Congress. Isn't that a fascinating survey there? No one's above 50%. Not your wife, your doctor, your pastor, no one is above 50% in your estimation of telling you the truth in important matters all the time. They have, this is whoever's the artist has done, the Pinocchio rendition throughout it. Here you have, the President of the United States and the Soviet Union. And you know what diplomacy is. 2 men sit down at a table and tell each other a lie, and they know the other one's telling them a lie. That's my definition of what diplomacy is. Well, that's what they're doing. They're both sitting down at a table discussing things, they're both lying. So that represents politics. And then you have some lady advertising something. What is it, a new soft drink or a jar of peanut butter? And look at her old nose there. Advertisers. And this is bankers because of all the investment scams down there. And then we have teachers, and we have people who graduate from school and are trying to get a job with their long noses. They say increasingly America and much of the rest of the industrialized world is becoming, see if I haven't said this to you many times, is becoming and this has happened in theology, is becoming a society of specialists, discrete pockets of people with access to certain kinds of information. That has led, according to one well-known American philosopher, to a new ethic among many of these same specialists. Here's its essence. Since laymen cannot possibly know the whole truth about specialized subjects, then lying to them is all right. You see, doctors and dentists and people like that, they are so specialized, their language is so technical, and they know so much about it that you could never possibly know, that they can't really explain to you like they need to. They think it's okay just to lie to you. Just might as well lie. We can't tell them the truth. They're too far below us. The same thing has happened in theology, where at one time you just used to write, kind of a book about the Bible. Now you can write a book about the verb that's found only one time in one portion over here. You can write a book on the topic now, because knowledge is increasing and blossoming in people's lives. People are becoming so specialized in certain areas. And so it ends with reference to the California 5th grade school system. Things are so bad that even the secular humanists who are controlling public education think that there is value to a values education. And so they've got certain books here now that are being tried out in California 5th grade to try to instill back in children standards of character, of honesty, of moral uprightness. And so for younger children, they have such things as the Bible. Of all things, the Bible. They know that's somehow going to teach you truthfulness, as well as a few others, like Jack and the Beanstalk, which is an old familiar one, but it's got a moral. It's a story that has a moral to it. And then for older children, they have things like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and others you may know better, like William Shakespeare's Othello, and John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, about this misfit character and the person that helped him. And some more, and perhaps the greatest one there that I remember really enjoying reading, Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller's award-winning play, Death of a Salesman. It's just a tragic account. So you can get it in a little paperback book, I'm sure. And it's just a tragic account of a man that falls prey to a materialistic society. And in other words, those stories, it's not just like reading, Captain Zeus from Mars or something. Those stories have a moral to them. They have a point that they're trying to get across to the person, such as Jack and the Beanstalk, or the Bible. You get many points that are being presented there. Praise the Lord. Well, I don't really want to stop this morning. Let me just have enough time to finish some of these things out. So what we're on here is our second point, that untruthfulness totally destroys community and interpersonal relations and bonds. A relationship is built upon an understood, underlying mutual trust. See, I don't have a relationship with the fellow who pumps gas in my car. I don't know him. I don't tell him what I did that day. I don't tell him what my Social Security number is. I don't tell him what my deepest thoughts are. I don't know him. I'm not going to open up my life to someone that I don't know or that I don't want to get to know in a deep way. When it comes to the Christian church, we should want to get to know each other. And so honesty in relations is openness in them. Honesty is openness in relations. And I again say in my paper, think what life would be if each person who spoke to us lied. Now this article is saying we're approaching that, but we're not there yet. Think of each person. Think if you went up to the window at the store and asked them, how much is this, and they lied to you. Think if every price on every product in the grocery store was marked $2 under what they're going to charge you at the counter. Think if everything was like that in life. See, people who try to justify lies in some places, and where are you going to put the period? We couldn't even live with one another. I go on to say it would be better to live the life of a monk. You couldn't even live in society with other human beings without this standard of morality called honesty. You have to have it. You have to, I don't care whether you're saved or lost, you have to have it to survive.
Amen.
You can go to the store and it says $2.15 and the price is really $8, and you don't know that until you get up there ready to pay. Now that's kind of an exaggerated case example, but all of life could end up like that if people just went totally berserk as far as lying is concerned. Well, we wouldn't survive. We would die a natural death. We couldn't even exist anymore with standards like that. Now, I have a few references down here. Proverbs chapter 25. Let's look at a few of these here. Proverbs 25, verses 18 and 19. Oh, this is a very good reference. You want to take notice of this. Proverbs 25, verses 18 and 19. A man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword, that's a harmful instrument, and a sharp arrow. Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. You ever kneaded your mouth with the tooth in the right place to get that piece of food? A broken tooth? Well, you don't want to put confidence in that mouth of yours whenever it comes to take a certain bite in a certain place on this delicious food. It's an unfaithful tooth, an unfaithful mouth, because you won't get what you're after. Confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. And then we have the apostle. That's in the Old Testament. That's just a nice little proverb that's inspired Scripture, and that's very true for real life. But then we have the apostles' teaching to us in Ephesians 4. I want to take the time to read these verses as well. Ephesians 4, verses 17 through 25. We have the apostles' own teaching to us about this matter of truthfulness and of our relations with one another. Ephesians 4, verses 17 through 25. This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk in the vanity of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. Remember that a lie alienates you, separates you from God. Who, being past feeling, have given themselves over unto lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. But ye have not so learned Christ, if so be that ye have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, that ye put off concerning the former life the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Now, there's the clearest New Testament teaching you'll find. It's repeated in Colossians 3:9. But here's the clearest New Testament teaching you'll find from the pen of the Apostle Paul himself against this untruthfulness or lying. Put away lying. Speak every man the truth. And he tells us why. Because your nature has changed. That old deceived and deceiving nature of yours, of the old man, if you're a new creation in Christ, that is subjugated to death in him, burial by baptism into Christ's death. You've been raised to walk in a newness of life. You're a new man, a new woman, a new creation. Therefore, live the fruit of the new life. The fruit of the new life is truthfulness, honesty. You don't try to hurt people's feelings, but you tell the truth. That helps to build relations. That won't ever destroy relations. That helps to build relations with people. We had a situation that came up just this week, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, where we had a certain sister who had been bringing us something to eat. Now, the first time she brought it to us, we thought it was angel's food. I mean, it was just delicious. We just sat down and just devoured it. I did, and then my wife and the children, and I don't know what happened to us or what happened to the food or what happened wherever. But over a period of time, we grew to dislike it more and more. Now, we liked it to begin with very much. Now, I'm not going to say who this is because I don't want to embarrass the person, but we liked this very much and came to dislike it. And so, you know, every time it'd be brought over, we'd all sit at the table staring at one another. Where's Mikey? We'll let him try it first, you know. And we're sitting around thinking, now, we're going to do something about this. What are we going to do about this? We got to figure some way out of this. Now, we got to figure a kind way and a polite way. Well, we couldn't really think of a kind way or a polite way besides a truthful way. And I said, you know, if we tell them the truth, that should show them that we love them. We love them too much to lie to them or allow them to live under, you know, a misrepresentation of what truthfully exists. See, think of it that way. When you tell someone else the truth, you're showing them your love for them. And I said, and I would imagine they would love us more as well, to know that we're going to be truthful about these things. And so we worked on that, figuring out, what are we going to do? What are we going to say about this? And I said, well, we're teaching on truthfulness. I guess we better do it then. I guess that's what the name of the game is all about. And so I don't know what my wife said, but we shared it with this sister. And we didn't get any threatening phone calls after that, or missing our hubcaps or anything like that after that. We joke sometimes. We told the children, we said, now if you're bad, if you disobey us today, we'll make you eat some of Marie. Well, I think I just ruined her reputation as a cook now. Well, only one that matters for is Dale anyway, though. He can always buy his lunch out. I'm sure she's a good cook, I'm sure. But we said, we'll make you eat some of that pizza if you disobey us today. So that's kind of what how we ended up, our attitude the last time we had it, I sat down and ate it. But, just, I don't know what happened. We loved it the first time. I mean, we thought it was just angel's food sent right out of heaven. It tasted so good. So somehow we must have bit into something sour along the way, and it changed our opinion toward it. But it wasn't just one of us. It was all of us. So I'll have to doctor the tape up on that, I guess. We do appreciate it very much, so, Sister. It's very thoughtful of her to do that for us all the time. But we've got to be truthful with one another. And, if it's something that you don't enjoy, I've told you that when you come to my house, that if you're hungry, then say that you're hungry. Don't say that you're not. And if you don't like what we have, don't say that I do like it. That would be lying then. See, you don't love me, or I don't love you if I lie to you about things. It's not going to hurt my feelings. We're supposed to be more mature than that. Amen. I mean, that's so selfish if it hurts your feelings. We should be so considerate of one another that I wouldn't dare want to be feeding them or giving them something to drink that they don't like. I mean, that would be cruelty on my behalf. And so you would have to let me know what you do like or what you don't like. And I would want you to let me know. For me to continue to live under the delusion that you like this when you don't, well, I don't love you as much as I say that I do. I say that I do, and I'm trying to prove it by giving you something, but yet I'd like to give you something that you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, then don't lie to me about it. And if you don't enjoy it, then I'm not going to get any benefit from it. I won't enjoy it, especially if I find out later that I've been living under that delusion. But people like that, we're raised with this Aunt Maybell case here. We're raised saying those things are okay. Just go ahead and tell a lie. Tell a lie, because if you don't, life would have much rougher edges. I don't know that I call that a rough edge to tell someone the truth. It doesn't put me a day behind on my schedule because someone said that this didn't appeal to them or that didn't appeal to them. It's fine with me. Only if we're self-centered does that hurt our little own feelings in. Only if you're self-centered. You say you're giving this to them because you love them. If you really are giving it because you love them, then you'd want to do what they would want to be done, not what you would want to do for them. We discussed that in buying gifts for people before. Too many times people try to buy a gift that they would like this person to have, such as wives try to buy a tie that they would like to see their husband wear, not those things that he wears. So it's kind of a sneaky way of getting around telling the truth about, that 100%, 110% polyester suit of his or whatever. And people do that at Christmas all the time. They don't buy gifts because they love you. They buy you something to wear because they want you to wear that for their sake, not for your own. They are tired of seeing you in something else. And so they try to bless themselves by giving something to you. And I don't think that's really a pure motive. I think we have to have more open and more honest relations in that. I'm very serious with these matters. We will never grow as a group or as a church of people here until we can be honest with one another. We all have our likes and dislikes. Hopefully we're not just, so terribly picky that nothing satisfies us, because I'm not that way. Many things satisfy me. I could continue to eat what our sister was fixing me from now on. It's just that it lost its, glorious flavor that it had for me at one time. But I guess maybe some people are impossible to please, so just let them buy their own gifts then. But anyway, Ephesians 4:25, do not lie to one another. And then let's conclude them with a third consequence, the most perilous of them all, of untruthfulness. A third consequence of untruthfulness. All habitual liars will be destroyed eternally. All habitual liars will be destroyed eternally. Psalm 5:6. Thou shalt destroy them that speak lies. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. 2 Kings 5:25-27. We don't need to turn there, but 2 Kings 5:25-27. That's Elisha and his servant. His servant Gehazi lied to him. The prophet's pronouncement was the leprosy that clung to Naaman will cling to you and to your family forever. Proverbs 19. In verse 5 tells us that lying will never go unpunished. There is a day of reckoning for all sin. Sometimes we have a foretaste of that with God's discipline in this life. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. These Christian leaders who have come along teaching us situationalism, they will be held accountable for that. Telling us it's okay to commit adultery under certain circumstances. Lying is permissible for some people in certain situations. They will not be unpunished, and they shall not escape. And so many times I think that you find that form of retribution meted out even in this life. Liars eventually get caught. Every liar has to tell a second lie to cover his first one. And the more lies you tell, the more you have to tell to cover, but then the more you forget about the first ones that you told. And that's how inconsistent then people become, because they can't remember what they told earlier. Isn't it good to be a person who tells the truth? Because then you remember what you said before is, I spoke the truth. Rather than be a situationalist. Now, was that a situation where I was allowed to lie or not? I can't remember whether I lied or not. So now we don't know how to deal with that when it comes up again. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. A false witness, verse 9, a false witness shall not be unpunished. Twice in one chapter. And he that speaketh lies shall perish. And then those scriptures that are even more awesome than that, going to conclude our whole study now of my scholarship paper with these in the Revelation of John, chapters 21 and 22. Revelation 21 and 22. So in this anything goes society of ours, as you're turning to Revelation 21 and verse 8, make sure that you bring your children up in the nurture and admonition of God Almighty, which is to speak the truth as the truth is in Jesus, and He is the truth. It is an anything goes society, and everything is relative. And we dare not live that way. The fearful, the unbelieving, the abominable, murderers, whoremongers, sorcerers, idolaters, fairly bad company, I would say, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. That's what God thinks of lying and people who are habitual liars. They will all be thrown into hell. They'll be thrown into the lake of fire, which is the second death. That should make us tremble when we think of that. You say, well, now wait a minute, I'm not a habitual one, but I've fallen once or twice. Well, maybe you're thinking, well, that means I'll never be thrown into the lake of fire. But discipline is still going to be meted out for people who disobey. Obedience brings blessing, disobedience brings discipline. And if this is what God thinks of habitual liars, then maybe it's not quite so bad for a person who tells an occasional one. But then again, I think we would also need to take into consideration the doctrine of how much light a person has according to Scripture. Those who have light are more responsible than those who do not. So although the punishment or judgment might be greater for habitual liars, the sin may be greater for the Christian who tells a lie.
For the continuation
So although the punishment or judgment might be greater for habitual liars, the sin may be greater for the Christian who tells a lie. Why? He knows better. He has light. A person out there in the world, he's cauterized his conscience now. He doesn't know what he's supposed to say. Just say whatever he wants to say. Christian has light, though. He should know about these matters. Later on in this chapter, verse 27, you see, this is New Jerusalem. New Jerusalem coming down. John said, I saw her come down out of heaven as a bride adorned for her husband. There shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. As characteristics of those who are prohibited entrance into New Jerusalem, I find it rather remarkable and interesting that lying is one of them. Of all the characteristics that would prohibit, that would keep that person from the new city of God, it's going to be a city of sparkling beauty. And all the sparkling beauty, think of what that speaks of, purity and truth. There'll be no light in that city. The Lamb will be the light thereof. Streets of gold, foundations made of all various jewels and precious metals from the earth. 12 gates made of 12 pearls. Lying there, hardly. Liars there, hardly. If that's not enough, the next chapter as well. Chapter 22 and verse 15. Talking about outside of the city. Without the city are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. And whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. That's why I would rather hurt someone's feelings than be guilty of the sin of lying. I mean, when you measure things in the balance of eternity, there's no comparison. I would rather hurt someone's feelings, and I don't ever want to do that, but I would rather hurt someone's feelings. That's got to be the least concern of mine when it comes into getting into the kingdom. Now, did I hurt someone's feelings? I think I better lie to them so I won't hurt their feelings. Or we ought not. We better not. It'd be best to hurt my feelings and get into the kingdom by telling me the truth. It'd be best for me not to have any feelings that you can hurt, to be dead to those things so it doesn't bother me, to be alive to God and to be alive to a desire to bless you. So all habitual liars will be destroyed eternally. Psalm 5 through Revelation 22:15. They are categorically, absolutely, positively excluded from the kingdom of God. Period. One more thing I want to do or to say in conclusion before we're totally through with looking at this anatomy of a lie is to give you the following sentence or two and to look at some scriptures that will support this. And of course this concerns situation ethics. It concerns the absolutism versus relativism. In difficult situations, moral or spiritual compromise is never an option. In difficult situations, moral or spiritual compromise is never an option. That is just not an option for a Christian. If you get caught in a sticky situation, telling a lie is not even an alternative for you. We must trust in God and obey. As the old song said, trust and obey, for there is no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Trusting is not enough and obeying is not enough. We've got to do both of them, trust and obey. A situationalist would say, well, just trust him, but you don't have to obey these legalisms about always remaining truthful in everything you say and do and think. Well, we must certainly always remain truthful in everything we say and do and think. We must trust in God and obey. And if it so pleases Him, He will deliver us. We're talking about difficult situations. This is what the situationalist always wants to bring up to us. But what if your life depended on it? What if your children were starving? Wouldn't you steal some bread or food for them? Well, that's not an option for a Christian. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. We can't dictate what theology we're going to have this day by the circumstances we're experiencing today. No, if my children were starving, I still am not allowed scripturally to steal to provide for them. I can't break that law to satisfy their hunger pains. You can't go against the law of God because you think you're going to improve or at least sustain human life. We must trust in God and obey, and if it so pleases Him, He will deliver us. Let's look at some scriptures and then I'll finish that sentence. 2 Chronicles 13, verses 13 through 18. If it so pleases him, he will deliver us. Just some that are very good, but not well known in the Old Testament. Especially this one here in 2 Chronicles is not that well known. Jeroboam caused an ambushment to come about behind them. So they were before Judah, and the ambushment was behind them. And when Judah looked back, behold, the battle was before and behind. You got a battle between Israel and Judah now. When God's behind Judah, and its armies and not Israel. And so they, the armies of Judah, they cried unto the Lord, and the priests sounded with the trumpets. Then the men of Judah gave a shout. And as the men of Judah shouted, it came to pass that God smote Jeroboam and all Israel before Abijah and Judah. The children of Israel fled before Judah, and God delivered them into their hand. In other words, a supernatural, miraculous deliverance here is recorded, without Judah having to surrender to her pagan northern sister Israel and follow after her religious practices. Abijah and his people slew them with a great slaughter, so there fell down slain of Israel, look at this number, 500,000 men. Thus the children of Israel were brought under at that time, and the children of Judah prevailed, and here's why, because they relied upon the Lord God of their fathers. When you're in a difficult situation, if you'll rely upon God, if He so chooses and so pleases and wills, then He will deliver you. And if not, then He won't. But don't try to deliver yourself by spiritual or moral compromise. Let the decision of the outcome be in the hands of the Lord. Ezra 8, verses 21 to 23. Ezra 8, 21 to 23. Ezra and his group, they've been given permission now to return from the lands of the captivity or the diaspora to Jerusalem. Then I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava, that we might afflict ourselves before our God, to seek of Him a right way for us and for our little ones and for all our substance. Now watch this. This is kind of an embarrassing verse, verse 22. Ezra certainly is a little embarrassed. Well, he says, "For I was ashamed to inquire of the king a band of soldiers and horsemen to help us against the enemy in the way." Why? Because he had been too bold in his positive confession before the king earlier. And now he didn't want to go back on that. He would have been embarrassed to. "Because we had spoken unto the king, saying, The hand of our God is upon all them for good that seek Him, but His power and His wrath is against all them that forsake Him." In other words, the picture is, before he left, Ezra had gone before the king and given this bold testimony, God's on our side and He'll protect us. We don't need any of the help of men or to lean to the arm of the flesh. Now he's actually out in there, and they're going to start crossing over this land. Now he sees that he's got some problems and difficulties out there. There could be some robbers or some raiders come along. So now he has second thoughts. Well, I wish I wouldn't have been so bold, because then I could go back to the king and ask for some escorts. But he said, no, we're just going to seek God. So verse 23, "So we fasted and besought our God for this, and He was entreated of us." We don't read of them having any problems or struggles, no robbers, no raiders, and there were hundreds of them on these caravan routes in the Middle East in these days, on their journey to Palestine. No problems at all, because they sought the Lord. And then something that is much better known, Daniel 3, verses 17 and 18. Difficult situations, compromise is not an option for a Christian. He will trust and obey. And if God so wills, God will deliver him. The command here is you either bow or burn. And so the three Hebrew children answer, "If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace," there's His ability, "and He will deliver us out of thine hand, O king." Here's their confession of what they hope His will is. "But if not," He's always able. But if He's not willing, for some reason that's not known to us, we discussed this earlier in Christian ethics, it's known as the ethical ability of God. When He can deliver someone that will not at the same time thwart some eternal will or purpose of His. He's not going to go against His own will or purpose. And if to deliver a person would be going against that will or purpose, that he will not deliver them. So that's why they know their theology. They say God's able. We believe that he will. 99 times out of 100, he is going to deliver us. But if there's some reason, something higher here, the will of God higher than what we know, and we don't really know why he can't, but if he doesn't, well, he said, they said, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. In other words, with this threat over their head of bow or burn, they said, we'd rather burn than bow. We believe God will deliver us, but if he doesn't, we still won't bow. There's the situation for the Christian. This is Old Testament too here. How much more should it be true of us? That compromise is not an option for us. We would rather burn than bow. And we're trusting the whole time that we're not going to have to burn, that he's going to deliver us from that as well. So we must trust in God and obey. If he so pleases, he will deliver us. Of course, if he doesn't, he won't. The final part of that sentence, even if it comes from sources other than the obvious. And of course, it generally does. How would they have ever known they're going to get thrown into this fire and they'll come out of it without even the smell of smoke on their garments? But the men who threw them in would all be consumed. How would they have known that? They would never have known that. How are we going to get out of this? Even if this deliverance comes from sources other than the obvious. Our human eyes so often are just focusing on the obvious. We think, well, this is the way God's going to do it. And so often it comes from another quarter. If you'll turn to Esther, I'll show you probably the classic passage about this. Esther 4 in the last few verses here. Esther 4. So many times God does it a different way than what we would assume. He has his own will and purpose to fulfill. You go ahead and tell the truth. We're talking about truthfulness in those situations. And even if you think it might cost you something, you don't know. Maybe in telling the truth, you're going to so bless that person that they finally met someone who comes what may, speaks and does and says the truth, that you get some reward out of it. Things like that have happened where you wouldn't have known it beforehand. But if you'll just trust and obey, you're going to get delivered, even though it might come from some unknown quarters. Hallelujah. Now, Haman has devised this plan to have all the Jews in the empire, the Persian Empire, killed. Esther, who's queen, happens to be in a place where maybe she could do something to thwart that plan, to stop that plan. But it doesn't seem like she's just totally willing to begin with, because she's concerned about her own life. That if she goes in before the king, Ahasuerus or Xerxes, without him holding out the golden scepter to her, then she might be killed. And so her friend, relative Mordecai, is kind of prodding her on to go on in. Verse 10. Again Esther spake unto Hatach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces to know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, well, there is but one law for him, and that is to put them to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. So she's kind of giving some excuses why she shouldn't be the one who has to go in before the king. Now watch what happens in these next few verses. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Mordecai commanded, through these intermediaries that are going in between them, to answer Esther, think not with thyself. Now this is his own relative, and he speaks in plain language to her. Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. That's the type of faith he has in God. It seems like God would want to use Esther. But Mordecai says, you know what? If you choose not to be a channel for God to use, don't think that you're going to escape in there while the rest of us are slaughtered out here. God will take care of us, and you will be the one who ends up dead. Now, he's talking to his own dear relative, but he speaks in very plain words. If altogether you hold your peace, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer, Go and gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan the palace, and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. And I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. Now that's the type of attitude she should have. I'm going to try to save my people. And if I can be that channel that God's looking for, then so be it. And if not, then so be that as well. At least I would have trusted and obeyed at the same time, instead of remaining in the palace saying, well, I trust, but not done something about that trust. So it's one thing for us to say, I've got that doctrine of truthfulness. It's another to live that doctrine of truthfulness, even when it may cost us something. And we need to remember that you don't ever know that it's actually going to cost you something. Many times Satan just blows something out of proportion in a person's mind, that this is what could happen to you if you tell the truth, when that may in fact not take place.